talk about circulatory system of fish. We are going to talk about circulatory system of fish, right? Why we are going to talk about circulatory system of fish? Because the circulatory system of the fish which I will draw here, that is a classical example of closed circulatory system and single circulatory system, right? Again, I will repeat, we are going to talk about circulatory system of fish as a classical example of closed circulatory system and single circulatory system. We say that this is closed single circulatory system, right, in the fish. Now, before really I go into detail of whole circulatory pattern in the fish, inside the fish, I would love to mention what is really meant by closed circulatory system and what is really meant by single circulatory system. In very simple words, I will say closed circulatory system is a type of circulatory system in which circulating fluid is present. Yes, I just made a very simple diagram of closed circulatory system. In closed circulatory system, let's suppose this is circulatory fluid. Circulatory fluid is present or enclosed, the word I'm using, where circulatory fluid is enclosed inside the tubes. For example, if this is one very simple circulatory system, so here in closed circulatory system, the circulatory fluid is blood. The circulating fluid is blood, and this blood will be present in the cavities of the pump, heart, in the arterial system, in the capillaries, and in the venous system. Or in very simple way, we can say closed circulatory system is a type of circulatory system in which circulating fluid is mostly limited within the vessels and heart cavities. Is that right? But to elaborate it more, to make it more clear, I would say that this is a closed circulatory system, and let's suppose here are your cells, tissue cells, right? Now, a very important thing is that here circulatory system is limited within the circulatory vessels, and there is other fluid. There is other fluid which is present around the cell. This is called interstitial fluid. What is this called? Interstitial fluid. Interstitial fluid. Now, interstitial fluid is basically fluid which is present in the tissue around the cells, right? Now, what really happens in closed circulatory system, that circulating fluid does not mix with interstitial fluid directly. Listen again, it's worth it. Circulating fluid does not mixes with the interstitial fluid, even though there are exchanges. For example, oxygen is coming here, carbon dioxide is moving there, right? Even though circulating fluid and interstitial fluid do make exchanges. For example, nutrients are given from the circulating fluid, from blood to the interstitial fluid to the cells. Metabolic waste products are taken from the cells to the interstitial fluid to the blood. But important thing which is there, that those organisms which are having closed circulatory system, where in such organisms you can distinctly or clearly differentiate between circulating fluid and interstitial fluid. Is that right? Now, if we talk about open circulatory system, right, just few words, I will just draw one classically. Yes. Classically, open circulatory system is present in insects, right? I will just show for comparison. Now, in the insect, there is open circulatory system. What we really mean by open circulatory system, that even though they have a rudimentary pump and they do have a vessel, but here the circulating fluid, listen now carefully, circulating fluid, right, pumped by this main vessel, but from the vessel it will come out into body cavities. It will come out into body cavities. And if there are cells here, let's suppose there are 3 cells here to be given service, this fluid which has come free into body cavity will come directly in contact with the tissue cells. It means in open circulatory system, the circulating fluid, and eventually this circulatory fluid will be taken back by this pump and circulated again. From here also it will, this in the body cavity the fluid is moving. This is called, in open circulatory system, this fluid is called hemolymph. This fluid is moving and it will give the cells nutrition and remove the metabolic waste and re-enter into pump. Now the important thing is, here the circulatory fluid is directly not limited to vessels. It is coming out of the vessels, it is moving around the tissue cells, and you are unable to differentiate between the circulating fluid in the vessel and interstitial fluid, right? Now when we talk about fish, I say fish are having closed circulatory system. It automatically means that when I will explain the circulatory system of fish, the blood of the fish or circulating fluid of the fish, while it is circulating throughout the circulatory pattern, it will be limited within the vessels of the fish and cardiac heart chambers of the fish. Is that right? Then, so it is clear now what is the difference between the closed circulatory system and open circulatory system. The second point which I want to elaborate is what is meant by single circulation, right? Let me explain it. Again I will repeat. Closed circulatory system is a type of circulatory system where circulating fluid is limited in the lumen of the vessels and cardiac or heart cavities, and fluid does not mix with the interstitial fluid or tissue fluid, circulating fluid. Open circulatory system is a type of circulatory system in which circulating fluid is not limited in the vessels. It comes out into body cavities and comes in directly with the cells, and you cannot differentiate between the circulating fluid and the interstitial fluid. Is that right? Yes. Now, as I said that we will talk about circulatory system of the fish as closed circulatory system, which is single also. It means single closed circulatory system. Let me tell you what is meant by the single and double circulatory system, right? Already you know the difference between open and closed, right? We talked about what is closed circulatory system, then we talked about closed versus open circulatory system. Now we will talk about what is meant by the single circulatory system. It's very easy concept, right? Let's suppose here is the heart. Here is the heart, and circulatory fluid is coming to the heart through the vessels. Circulatory fluid is coming to the heart through the vessels, and heart is pumping again into vessels, and it is circulating in a specific direction. And of course, throughout it is present within the vessels. Is that right? Now, if here what we see, during one circulation, complete circulation, circulatory fluid, here is the blood, passes through the heart only once, only single time. So what is single circulatory system? Single circulatory system is a type of closed circulatory system. Classically we say that closed circulatory system can be single, can be incomplete double, and can be completely double circulatory system. Here I am trying to teach you what is meant by the single circulatory system and how and what is the basic difference between single and double. In single circulatory system, again I will draw the diagram, right? Let me draw the vessels and the fluid. Let's suppose here is your heart. Okay, this is your heart. It's a very simple diagram, right? And let's suppose this is your vascular system, right? Now, in this vascular system, what we see, if fluid is from the heart, go throughout the body, and then again come back to the heart and again cycles. Now, in one complete cycle through the body, fluid passes or blood passes through the heart only once. Such system is called single circulatory system. A little comparison with double circulatory system. In double circulatory system, what happens that, yes, first of all, they are having heart. Let's suppose this is the heart. In double circulatory system, from the tissue, let's suppose here were the tissue. Here is also tissue cells. From the tissue cells, circulatory fluid is coming to the heart. From the heart, it is going to the respiratory organs like lung, for example, lungs, right? From the lungs, it again comes back to the heart and then goes to the body. Now it means that, yes, as compared to this one, if you look at this pattern, here circulatory system is designed like this, that from the heart, blood will go to the tissues, systemic tissues. After that, it return to the heart. Now from the heart, it will go to the respiratory organs. From there again, it will return to the heart and again get pumped to the tissues. Now you can see here that here basically heart circulatory fluid passes during one cycle. It passes through the heart how many times?
2 times.
2 times. It is passing through the heart 2 times. When circulatory fluid like blood in an organism passes 2 times through the heart during one circuit, one complete cycling, then we say this is double circulatory system. Now we'll go back. If I say that fish circulatory system is a closed circulatory system and single circulatory system, what I mean? I mean in the fish, the blood is limited within the lumen of the vessels and heart chambers. Blood does not come out of that and does not mix with the interstitial fluid. And as it is single circulatory system, in this case, in case of fish, blood, when in complete circulation of the blood, blood passes through the heart only once, right? Now, if you have understood it well, let's go into detail of this beautiful fish circulatory system. Before I really go there, yes, study of fish is called physiology. Yes, study of fish is called not physiology, not physiology. Study of fish is called, yes, yes, how would you pronounce it? Ichthyology. Study of fish is called ichthyology. Ichthyology. Is that right? Anyway, let's go back. Yes? ICH. ICH. Yes. ICH. Theology. Right? Study of the fish. Okay. Let's just study the circulatory system of the fish for now. Okay, we make here the cells of fish. I'm making here, okay, cells of the fish, and circulatory system has to provide these cells with the nutrition, and circulatory system has to remove from here waste products. Is that right? Now, let's suppose these are very fine vessels which are present in most of the tissues of the fish, and these fine vessels are called capillaries. These are called capillaries. And once this capillaries, the blood in capillaries has given oxygen to the tissues, it has removed the carbon dioxide from the tissues, it has given the nutrition to the tissues like glucose or other nutritious substances, and removed the metabolic waste. After that, listen now again, if blood is coming from here, right, and passing through the capillaries are very fine blood vessels which are passing through the tissues, and these are very, very thin, and many things can be exchanged. So when these are fish capillaries, they are passing through the tissue cells, right, different tissues, it may be many different tissues, right. Now when this blood is passing through these capillaries, It is what it is releasing here? Oxygen and nutrients. And what it is taking up from the cells? Carbon dioxide and other metabolic waste, right? And after that, these capillaries unite together and make veins. What they make? Veins, right? So what really happens that these are the capillaries, and blood from the capillaries eventually drains into venous system, right? That drains into venous system. So this is a vein. Now this is vein. So we can say in the fish we have started circulatory system from the capillaries present in tissues, and blood from there, after doing the exchanges with the tissues, is drained into veins, right? And this blood which is in the veins, it will return to the heart. It will return to the heart. Fish has a heart. Fish is not heartless, right? So it will return to the heart. Now let me draw some structure related with the fish heart. Fish heart is classically having two chambers. It has two-chamber heart with two accessory structures. One structure is before the heart and another structure is after the heart. Let me draw. Let's suppose you are the part of this, you are standing here. Okay, somehow you happen to be inside the fish, and inside the fish you happen to be inside the vascular system of the fish. Now you are moving, right? From the tissue to the veins. Different veins will fuse with each other and make major veins. They will make big veins. These big veins or major veins will eventually drain and bring all the blood into a very special type of organ, right? This organ, yes, I'm going to draw this organ outside so we can see it in more detail. Yes. So we were talking that blood which is coming from the tissues of the fish coming through the veins, and veins fuse with each other and make the major veins. These major veins will drain into this tissue, right? Into this special organ, rather. I must say a special organ. Now what is this organ? Let me, actually this organ, I'm making it here, right? This organ is just a place where returning venous blood collects. It's a collecting place. It's a collection place, right? So major veins are coming to this special place. Suppose these are major veins. I'm showing that blood from major veins are coming to this very special space. Now this space, it is like a cavity. It is like a cavity, and cavity can be called sinus. Cavity can be called sinus. Sinus means cavity. So we can call it, this is a sinus. But what kind of sinus is it? What type of sinus is it? It is a sinus which is receiving and collecting venous blood. What kind of blood is coming? Venous blood. Because this sinus or this cavity is receiving venous blood, so we will call it sinus venosus. Sinus venosus. So this is sinus venosus. Now we can say in simple word that blood comes from the tissues of the fish, right, from the capillaries of multiple systems into major veins, and major veins drain into sinus venosus. Or so what is sinus venosus? Sinus venosus is just a cavity in which major veins are bringing venous blood of the fish, and this cavity is responsible to continuously receive and accommodate the incoming venous blood. It just acts like a pool of venous blood, or we can say it acts like a dam of venous blood or collection center for venous blood. Is that right? Now, after this, there is other chamber, and that chamber, let me draw it here. Now this chamber, okay, let me draw a little smaller. They are coming too big. I will draw the big size outside. So what was here? Sinus venosus, right? And so we can say you are coming through the major veins and eventually you will find yourself into sinus venosus, right? And now what happens after that? Actually, the blood from sinus venosus can move ahead and go into a small chamber, and this chamber is called atrium. This is called atrium. Let me draw an atrium here. This is atrium. What is this chamber? Atrium. Now what is the function of atrium? Actually, this is the primer pump. It is a small pump. It does not have a powerful contraction. It is a very weak contraction. And after the atrium, when atrium will pump, the blood will move ahead, and the next chamber is ventricle. And ventricle is relatively strong chamber. This chamber, right, is able to contract strongly. Now you see, you are coming through, yes, major veins. Your first station was in sinus venosus. From there you will be pumped into atrium. From there you will be pumped into ventricle, right? Now here I want to say one thing, very interesting. When atrium will contract, when atrium will squeeze the blood, now there are two things. Blood can move backward and also forward, but these valves, these are the doors, incoming door, outgoing door. Is that right? Now this door, okay, I will draw it more clearly. Now this green one is the valve. What is this? Valve, right? Now they work one way. They allow the blood to move only in one direction, right? This is a valve. And how this valve are working? When atrium will contract, pressure in the atrium will increase, and that pressure will push the blood forward as well as backward. But when it will move backward, it will snap, pressurize on the sides of this valve. The valves are designed like this, that when atrium will contract, blood will move forward, also backward, because blood is being squeezed. But when blood will try to go back, it will hit the valve. And valve is designed like this, that when its leaflets, this is one flap of the valve, this is the other flap of the valve, when they are hit on the side, they will close. They will close. So what does it mean? It means that when atrium contract, blood is unable to go back. The only way left is forward. And yes, the valve here is designed in such a way that when pressure here increases, the forward direction valve opens. What I'm trying to say? I'm trying to say there are special arrangement of valves in the circulatory system in such a way that forward flow is allowed, backward flow is prevented, right? Classical example here I took, example of working of atrium, that this atrium, when it contracts, right, again later on I will tell you when it relaxes what happens, but first when it contracts, pressure in it increases, blood will love to go back as well as forward, but when it tries to go back, blood hits the flaps of this valve, the valve which is between the, yes, sinus and atrium, valve which is between the sinus venosus and atrium, and this valve is called SA valve. What is the name of this valve? SA valve. Why we call it SA valve? Sinoatrial valve. Why we call it SA valve? Because it is sinoatrial valve. Is that right? So in sinoatrial valve, now we can say whenever atrium contracts, if blood tries to go back, there is pressure on the side of the flaps of the sinoatrial valve and it shut close. So during contraction of atrium, blood is not allowed to go back to sinus venosus. But because pressure is increasing, it will move forward. Now the valve which is between the atrium and the ventricle, this valve is called, yes, atrioventricular valve. This one. This atrioventricular valve is designed like this. When pressure in the atrium increases, actually it opens. Right? Pressure, when atrium increases, this one opens. Now let me explain. These valves are like this. Like this. If pressure is coming from down, upward, they will open. But if from top pressure is coming, top and sides, they will close. Is that right? So let's suppose this is atrium and this is ventricle. If atrium contract, this is AV valve. This will open. But if here is your which valve? SA valve. When atrium will contract, SA valve will close. Right? So this is how atrium is working. That whenever, again, the venous blood from multiple tissues will drain or come through the major veins into sinus venosus, which is the pool of venous blood. From there, through the sinoatrial valve, blood moves into atrium. When atrium contracts, pressure in the atrium increases, right? Sinoatrial valve closes and atrioventricular valves open and blood moves into ventricle. Is that right? So backward blood flow is prevented, forward blood flow is allowed. Am I clear? Once atrium has contracted and pushed the blood into where? Ventricle. Yes. Once atrium has contracted and blood has gone to, yes, ventricle. Now this is the time for ventricle to contract. This is the time for the ventricle to contract. Now we come to this chamber. You are in third chamber. You have been through sinus venosus, you have been through the atrium, and now you are present in ventricle. Now ventricle is squeezing. Now there is another chamber right on the ahead of ventricle, and this chamber is also having a valve in between. Yes, there is a valve here, and let me make that chamber. Okay, I'm making it black colored. There is something very special about this chamber. I will, of course, explain that. Now what will happen? When ventricle will contract, okay. When ventricle will contract, push inside, again the similar things will happen. What will happen? Ventricle will contract, pressure in the ventricle increases, pressure in the cavity of ventricle increases, back valve, this valve will close. Very good. Because when pressure will increase, this valve, what is this valve? AV valve, it closes. Right? This is valve number 1, which is SA valve. Suppose this was valve number 2, AV valve, and this is valve number 3. I will not tell the name of this valve now. I will tell later. Little curiosity. Okay. Valve number 3. Now, when ventricle contracts, valve number 2 will close and valve number 3 will open, and blood will move from ventricle to this black chamber. I will tell you the name of this later. Blood will move into next chamber. Is that right? Now, before really I go for that, what happens? We come back. Reverse gear. Previously I said when atrium will contract, valve number 1 will close, valve number 2 will open. When ventricle will contract, valve number 2 will close and valve number 3 will open. This is how blood flow is in specific unidirection. In one direction blood is moving and not allowed to backward flow. Now another thing. Now imagine if atrium is relaxing, what will happen? Atrium has contract, push the blood into ventricle. After that it is relaxing. If atrium is relaxing, right? If atrium is relaxing, it will open up. It will enlarge. When it is contracting, it will squeeze the blood. But if it is contracting like this, it is relaxing outward. Let's suppose after the contraction, atrium relaxes. When atrium will relax, pressure in the atrium will go down. When pressure will go down, blood from the ventricle will try to come back. And when blood will try to come back, valve number 2 will close. Is that right? Yes. But because it is relaxing, here leaflets will open. So when atrium is relaxing, right, what happens? Valve number 2, first of all, pressure in the atrium drops, right? Blood from the ventricle try to come back, but these flaps open. Flap of the valve number 2, which is AV valve or atrioventricular valve. Now, as it is enlarging, right, this valve, what is this? Valve number 1 or sinoatrial valve, that will open. When it will open, atrium will, because pressure is low, will suck the blood from sinus venosus into its own cavity. It will pull the blood from the sinus venosus into cavity of atrium. So now it's very simple. It's an intelligently designed system. Nature has evolved it beautifully, that blood from the systemic, all multiple tissues through the major veins come into sinus venosus, and in the sinus venosus keep on collecting. And next to sinus venosus there is atrium. Atrium is contracting, relaxing, contracting, relaxing. When it contract, yes, which is this valve? SA valve. When it contract, SA valve closes and AV valve open and AV valve open, right? But when it relaxes, AV valve closes and SA valve open. And when it relaxes, it will pull the blood from sinus venosus into atrium. Is that clear? Any question up to this? Now, here the major pump is ventricle. The smaller pump is atrium. Atrium just push the blood, contract a little and push the blood into ventricle. But ventricle has to strongly contract the blood and push it throughout the body of fish. Ventricle has to push the blood so strongly that it should generate enough pressure that blood should circulate throughout the fish and come back. So we can say that atrium is smaller pump and ventricle is stronger pump. Atrium is weaker pump, not smaller. The right word is weaker pump. And ventricle is stronger pump. Or another way is that atrium is primer pump or minor pump, and ventricle is the major pump. Now, question is, listen carefully. Now we focus here on the ventricle. Ventricle contract produces significantly high pressure. When it will produce pressure, backflow will be prevented by closure of AV valve, and front flow will be allowed by the opening of valve number 3. I have not told the name, and it will come into this black chamber. I will tell you the exact name of this black chamber later, right? When it will contract, blood will go into this black chamber, and from the black chamber, yes, there is another vessel which is taking the blood again. From the black chamber, blood will move. Okay, you were coming through the tissue major veins, you visited sinus venosus, then you were pushed into atrium. No, you were pulled into atrium. You were pulled into atrium. From there you were softly pushed into ventricle, then strongly pushed into this black chamber, and then from there blood goes into this vessel. This vessel is called ventral aorta. Ventral aorta, this vessel, and here I'm still keeping it mysterious, right? Blood has gone to ventral aorta. Now here's one thing. Wow, there's an aorta here which is called ventral aorta. Just to make the concept clear, this was which valve? I will just a little practice. Sinoatrial valve. What was this valve? AV valve. And this was the valve which I didn't tell you the name of it, valve number 3. From here it was going into that black chamber, right? The name I didn't tell. From here I said that it was moving further forward. And what is this called? Ventral aorta. What is it called? Ventral aorta. Now, later on we will find there is another aorta. Aorta means big blood vessel, right? Another aorta which is on this side, right? and this is called, later on I will, in the lecture I will explain, there is another aorta here, and this is called dorsal aorta. What is it called? Dorsal aorta. Now, why this is called ventral aorta, why that is called dorsal aorta, that let me explain. This is the front of the fish, right? We call it interior side of the fish, and this is posterior side of the fish, right? This is interior side of the fish, this is posterior side of the fish, this is the belly of the fish, and this is the truly back of the fish. The belly side is called ventral side, and this back side on which there are vertebra, right, this side is called dorsal side. For example, in my case, in human being, here it is dorsal side and this is ventral side, right? But if I happen to be fish, I hope I'm not a fish, but if I draw this fish like this, I'm not very good at drawing the fish. This is what? Anterior side, this is posterior side. Now this is the belly, so this is ventral side and this is dorsal side. So naturally, if there is a big blood vessel on the dorsal side, belly side, we will call it dorsal aorta. And if there is a big blood vessel on the, oh, all of you are not sleeping, good, very good. So you remember that, very good. So if there is a big blood vessel on the sides of the belly side, this is dorsal or ventral? Ventral aorta, very good. And if there is a big blood vessel on the back of the side or on the vertebral side of the fish, this is called dorsal aorta. After this clarification, come back. So we just discussed major veins drain into sinus venosus, blood from there is going to the atrium, from there it is pushed into ventricle, then ventricle push the blood strongly into this special chamber, and from there into which? Ventral aorta. I will come to this black chamber still later. Okay, I will make it, so we have to talk about it. If I forget, please ask me after some time. Now, what was this? Ventral aorta. From the ventral aorta, yes. From the ventral aorta, special branches will go to the organ of respiration of fish. Organ of respiration or organ of gas exchange for the fish is given a special name which is called gills. The special organs which are present in fish, where blood has to move through the gills. From the gills, it will take the oxygen, blood will take the oxygen and remove carbon dioxide, and some other exchanges will also occur. So special organ of respiration or special organ of gas exchange in the fish are called gills. What are they called? Gills. Just keep in mind. So there are gills here in this area. Now we come back. Yes. What were these veins which were coming from? Capillaries, from multiple tissues. Now I will draw and you guys will tell. This is major veins, right? These are major veins. They are draining into this. What is this? Sinus venosus. Very good. And blood will go into atrium. Very good. From there it will go into ventricle, which is stronger pump, right? And from there it will go to this special chamber, and from this special chamber blood will go into which aorta? Ventral aorta. Ventral aorta. Now we will come back to it. Just keep it a little mysterious. When blood is passing through the ventral aorta, right, this will give branches to the gills. Gills are special structures. Let me draw suppose these are the gills. Gills are special structures here, where where water is passing through this structure, and water is having oxygen, because fish has to breathe, or I must say make gas exchanges underwater, within the water. So fish should be able to take the oxygen from the water. We take oxygen from the air, right? Fish will take the oxygen from the water and release the carbon dioxide into water. So fish have special mechanism, and that special organ is gills. Now this blood which is coming from ventral aorta, this is deoxygenated blood. This is coming from the tissues where it released oxygen and rich in carbon dioxide. So this blood which is reaching through ventral aorta to the gills, this blood is low in oxygen and high in carbon dioxide. Is that right? Now, what will happen that this ventral aorta will give special branches, yes, special branches to gills. Now these special branches which are going to the gills, they are given a special name. They are called afferent vessels, which are branches of ventral aorta. So we can say ventral aorta, blood from the ventral aorta arrives in gills. It arrives in gills through the afferent vessels. Some books mention afferent arteries. So, or some books mention branchial arteries. So we just mention it, what? Afferent vessels. Okay. And then what will happen? Actually, here is a set of capillaries. What are this? Set of capillaries. Remember, there were capillaries here too. These capillaries were called systemic capillaries. From the multiple systemic tissue, from the multiple tissues of the body. This is another group of capillaries, very thin-walled blood vessels. From afferent vessels, blood will arrive in gills, and then blood will pass through, what is this? Capillaries of the gills. Blood will pass through the capillaries of the gills, right? And when blood will pass through the capillaries of the gills, these are very thin. Around that area, water is passing and oxygen will be taken up, carbon dioxide will be removed, and some other exchanges are done. Once those exchanges are done, blood will drain into another set of vessels, right? Another set of vessels. Now oxygenated blood, yes. Now you see, blood was moving through the capillaries. While it is moving from, what is this? Afferent vessels, it goes into capillaries, and in the capillaries it makes exchanges. It loses oxygen and, it loses carbon dioxide and it gains oxygen. After that, that oxygenated blood will drain into this vessel, and this vessel will exit from the gills. It will go out of gills. We call it exiting from the gill. So blood will arrive in gills through afferent vessels. Blood will exit from the gills through efferent vessels. We call it efferent vessels. Right? Now it's very easy to remember because sometimes students confuse between afferent vessels and efferent vessels. Right? It's very easy. Blood is arriving through afferent. Arrive is with A, arriving blood. This is afferent. And exiting blood is through efferent. That is E for exit. So it's very easy. So if I say that I'm having this, what is this? Gills. Now blood is coming, listen carefully, through special branches of ventral aorta. These branches, because blood is arriving into gills, this should be coming through which vessels? Afferent vessels. And here the blood gets oxygenated. It does the exchanges through special capillary networks or fine vessels, and after losing carbon dioxide and gaining oxygen, oxygenated blood go out or exits through special set of vessels which are called efferent vessels. What are these called? efferent vessels, and efferent vessels will fuse together very happily, having the oxygenated blood. They unite together and make another aorta. And what is this aorta? Dorsal aorta. What is this aorta? Dorsal aorta. Is that right? Now, but here I want to mention one or two things very important. I didn't tell you about this black thing. Did I? No. This chamber, this is very important chamber, right? It is a very important function too, this chamber. Because what is the important thing? Let's suppose if we remove this black and blood is directly gone into ventral aorta. Now listen carefully. When ventricle contracts strongly, the blood will jump into, what is this? Ventral aorta under high pressure. Under high pressure and with high velocity. And then it will move through these fine capillaries and damage them with pressure. Again, listen very carefully. Let's suppose if this chamber is not there. Blood from the ventricle directly go to ventral aorta. What really happens, because ventricle has to pump strongly, the very strong pulse of blood is created. A very strong wave of blood is created with high pressure, and this wave or pulse of the blood from the ventricle, if it goes directly into ventral aorta, the pressure will be very high and this will reach to the gills, fine capillaries, and under high pressure these capillaries or gills, delicate structures will be damaged. Right? So strong pulse is not needed, that blood comes under so high pressure. So nature has put here a depulsator. What is this? Depulsator. It will reduce the pulse. I will go into detail of depulsator later. Just come back again. If it is directly connected, when ventricle contract, if there is no depulsator, what will happen? When ventricle contract, blood moves with high pressure, high velocity and may damage the gills. And when ventricle is relaxing, no blood is moving and there will be no flow here. But nature wants that blood flow through these structures with low pressure and relatively stable flow. So nature has put a very special structure here. This structure is, you just imagine, like a rubber pipe, elastic pipe, rubber pipe. It has lot of elasticity. So when ventricle push the blood, this will expand. This black chamber, when ventricle push the blood, it will expand and accommodate the pressure and volume of blood. So does not allow the pressure in ventral aorta and its branches to go very high. Because this special structure is present over here. What is this? This is a rubber pipe. We just imagine it is like a rubber pipe, not true rubber. Like a rubber pipe or a vessel part of a vessel which is highly elastic. It does have some smooth muscle and lot of elastic tissue. When ventricles strongly contract, the blood moves with high pressure and volume into this black structure. This will, because it is elastic, under pressure it will expand. And when it will expand, it will accommodate the pressure and volume. So there will be less pressure moving forward and less volume moving forward and no damage to the delicate structures of gills. Is that right? This is one advantage. Second advantage of this system is that when ventricle is relaxing, now after the contraction, when ventricle relaxes, valve number 3 will close. When ventricle is contracting, valve number 3 open and push the blood. But when ventricle is relaxing, backflow is not allowed. It will close. When it will close, at that time no blood is entering into this system. But pressure will drop here because some blood is moving forward. When pressure will drop, this elastic structure which was previously expanded, now it will squeeze in. It will recoil in. When it will recoil inward, whatever blood is here, it will push that blood forward and maintain some pressure and volume flow forward. Now imagine if the structure is not there, during ventricular contraction, high volume, high pressure might damage there. During ventricular relaxation, if this is not there, nothing flowing through these structures. But we want that there should be continuous blood through the gill system so that continuous exchanges are going on. Is that right? So nature has put here, evolved a special type of segment of vascular system, and this is highly elastic. So when ventricle push the blood with high pressure into this structure, this initially expands and accommodate the volume and pressure. So even though blood during the contraction with higher pressure and volume is moving forward, but still there is not too much pressure and to damage these structures. And when ventricle is relaxing backward, this valve will close and pressure here will drop as some blood has moved forward, and this will, previously it has expanded, now it will recoil and it will keep on pushing some blood which is stored here forward so that some flow can be maintained, right? This structure is called, there are two names for it. In some fish we call it conus arteriosus, because it is conical shape. We call it conus arteriosus. And in other group of fish, I will not go into detail, they call it bulbous. It's like a bulb, bulbous arteriosus. So we can say this black chamber, what is the name of this? Conus bulbous arteriosus. Conus bulbous arteriosus. Right? Again, I will repeat. So what is this special chamber after the ventricle? A chamber which is highly elastic, which can accommodate the high pressure during the contraction, right? And does not allow the blood to move forward into ventral aorta and through the afferent vessels under high pressure, so that there is no damage to the, what is this? Gills, delicate vascular structures, right? In some fish we call this conus arteriosus, and in other fish we call it bulbous arteriosus. Generally you can say conus oblique bulbous arteriosus. Is that right? You understand this? We can call it depulsator also. What we call it? Depulsator. It reduces the intensity of pulses, pulsatility of the blood. It reduces the intensity of pulsatility of the blood. Now, this is we have learned. We have said again that blood has gone through, what is this? Gills, and in the gills blood arrived through afferent and left through efferent vessels, and in between the afferent and efferent vessels they are connected with delicate capillary like structures, right? And these are responsible for gaseous exchange and other exchanges. Is that right? Now one more thing, because there are so many capillaries, whatever pressure is coming here, right, because these capillaries are acting as resistors, they resist the blood flow, they are narrow vessels, they resist the blood flow. When blood is passing through the capillaries of the gills, blood pressure further falls. Already the pressure which was generated by ventricle, partially it was dropped or depulsated through the conus bulbous arteriosus. Now second point where pressure drop is the capillaries of gills, that when pressure, whatever pressure is coming here, right, when blood is passing through this, through the capillaries of, yes, gills, pressure further falls. So when oxygenated blood from the gills through the efferent vessels reaches, what is this? Dorsal aorta, the pressure is very low. So movement will be very slow. Movement will be very slow, or blood movement will be very sluggish. Blood movement will be very sluggish. So blood will move. Okay, let me make here structures. Now you will tell me what are these structures. What was this structure? Ventral aorta. And what are these structures? These are afferent vessels. And what are these structures? Efferent vessels. And in between them what was there? Capillaries between the afferent and efferent, and these capillaries are responsible for gas exchanges. Here deoxygenated blood acquires oxygen and loses carbon dioxide, and oxygenated blood through the which vessels? Efferent vessels, right, goes into eventually into dorsal aorta. Is that right? Now, as dorsal aorta will move forward, it will give branches to the tissues and provide the tissues with oxygenated blood. So we can say that here your beautiful dorsal aorta is moving from front to the back of the, what is this? Fish. And on the way, this will provide branches, right, which will bring the oxygenated blood to the tissues. And in this way, cycle will be completed. You started from where? From capillaries in the tissue, we call it systemic capillaries. Then you went into systemic veins or major veins. Then you went into sinus venosus. Then there was which valve? I'm not going to show you. Yes. What is this valve? Sinoatrial valve. Very good. Then you reach in atrium. Then there is a valve, atrioventricular valve. Then you will reach into ventricle. Then you will pass through another valve into conus bulbus arteriosus. And this valve number 3 is called, yes, what is the name of this valve? Conus bulbus. We simply call it bulboventricular valve. You can call it conoventricular also, because it is between the cone and ventricle, but more commonly it is called bulboventricular valve. So there were 3 valves. Rapidly tell me, what was this valve? SA valve, sinoatrial valve. What was this valve? AV valve. And what was this valve? Bulbo. This is bulboventricular valve. So you were traveling from the systemic capillaries, you reached into major veins, drained into sinus venosus, passed through which valve? SA valve. Now you are in atrium. Then you pass through AV valve, and then you find yourself in ventricle, the major pump, and ventricle push you in conus bulbus arteriosus, through which valve? Bulboventricular valve. Here you will move in ventral aorta. Eventually you will be arriving in gills through the afferent arteries or afferent vessels into gills. There you will be pushed into gills capillaries, and you will throw the carbon dioxide and acquire the oxygen, and then you will find yourself, you have been pushed into efferent vessels, and eventually you will be draining and moving into dorsal aorta, and you are loaded with oxygen. And loaded with oxygen, again dorsal aorta will give branches to the multiple tissues, and you will again find yourself into tissue capillaries, and in the tissue capillaries you will release oxygen, acquire carbon dioxide, and cycle again begins. Now under this whole cycle, this structure is heart. Heart proper, atrium and ventricle. Because this is the heart proper, we say fish heart is two-chambered heart. Two-chambered heart. But it has 2 accessory structures, 2 additional structures. One before the heart, one after the heart. Before the heart it has sinus venosus. After the heart you have conus bulbus arteriosus. Is that clear? So again, now listen one thing carefully. Do you think the blood ever left the vascular system? No. Throughout its circulation, the circulating flowing blood was moving through veins, through sinus venosus, through atrium, through ventricle, through conobulbar structure, conus bulbus arteriosus, through ventral aorta, through afferent vessels, through gills capillaries, through efferent vessels, through, yes, what is it? Dorsal aorta, oxygenated blood, and then again back. Now in whole this rotation, the blood vessels pass through heart how many times? Once. So we call it single closed circulatory system, because blood was limited within the vessels, right? And it, during one complete circuit movement, it only passed once through the heart. We call it closed single circulatory system, right? Here another thing, the blood which passes through the heart, this is venous blood. Do you think oxygenated blood is passing through this? No. Only deoxygenated blood or oxygen poor blood passes through the heart, and this blood is called venous blood. So fish heart is called venous heart. What is it called? Venous heart. So fish have a venous heart, not Venus. This Venus is something very beautiful. You know about this Venus? Okay, go and study the solar system. There's a Venus there, but some Venus is also meant for a beautiful woman, right? But we will not talk about such things when we are talking about fishy things. We'll just simply talk about it is not Venus, it is Venus. Why it is called Venus heart? Because it is having venous blood. It is receiving the oxygenated, no, deoxygenated blood. Now few advantages and disadvantages of this system, right? Few advantages and disadvantages of this system. Before I go further into advantages and disadvantages of circulatory system of the fish, or advantages and disadvantages of closed single circulation, I would love to talk about how do you define fish? What is fish? Yes, what is fish? Don't tell me anything in water is fish. What is fish? Yes, ma'am. It is just like that, you know someone but you don't know much. Okay, let me explain before you tell me something totally new. For an organism to be fish, number one, it should be strictly aquatic. Aquatic means it is living in water. Number two, it is vertebrate. So what is fish? Aquatic vertebrate animal, which does not have limbs, does not have arms and legs. No digits, no fingers, no arms, no legs, no digits. Is that right? So and these are cold-blooded organisms. Why we call them cold-blooded organisms? Because the fish blood temperature or body temperature is not maintained in a very narrow range of temperature. Rather, it mainly depends on external environmental temperature, or we can say aquatic temperature, right? As opposed to humans or birds or these are warm-blooded animals. What we call them? Warm-blooded animal, not warm-bloody animals. We call it warm-blooded animals. Warm-blooded animals mean that our blood is warm. If we go into very cold weather, still we will produce the heat and try to maintain our core temperature around 37. But most of the fish in a broad range of temperature, if water is cool, their body temperature becomes less. If water is little warm, the fish body temperature goes up. Is that right? So such animals like fish, they are called cold-blooded animals, or we call them ectothermic animal. Ectothermic animals mean animals where temperature depends on the external environment. We are endothermic animals because our temperature is regulated internally. You go into very cold weather, maybe your skin will become cold, but internal temperature, body will try to maintain around 37. If you go to very relatively hot weather, maybe your superficial areas may become hot, but deeper into body tissues, they will try to maintain the pressure around 37. So our body, we call it endothermic because it is having some mechanisms to internally to keep our temperature, core temperature of the body around a set point, right? And it does not mainly depend on the external environmental temperature. Now, and for this kind of situation, our metabolism should be high, because if we are in a very cold weather, our metabolism should be high and produce more heat. Why more heat? To keep the internal structure of the body warm. But fish does not need this kind of thing, and if water is cold, fish also become relatively cold. Is that right? So it means fish does not require a lot of high, what is this? Metabolism. Another reason why fish does not require a lot of high metabolism, the reason being then fish movement are supported by the water. But we are the land animals, and when we are moving against anti-gravity, and water is not supporting our movement. So for movement, we utilize more energy, and we need to produce more energy, and we need to be generating higher metabolic rates. But fish can survive at lower metabolic rate because number one, it does not need to produce heat to keep itself warm, and at a higher temperature it will adjust its temperature with the environment. Number 2, fish movement are slightly supported by the water. So for their movement, usually they do not need lot of energy generation and high metabolism. Is that clear? Now come back. We were talking about that when blood is pumped from the heart, and when it is passing through the capillaries of gills, right, they act as resistance mechanism and pressure in the blood falls. When pressure falls, then oxygenated blood, when it will move from the gills through efferent vessels into dorsal aorta, because pressure is very low, the blood will move rapidly or slowly? Slowly. So it will deliver the oxygen to the tissues relatively slowly. It means that because of the sluggish or slow blood flow, it cannot support very high metabolism, because for very high metabolism we need to provide not only lot of nutrients to the tissue, we also need to provide lot of oxygen. Is that right? And rapid arrival of oxygen here, because fish can do with slow metabolism. Why they can do with slow metabolism? Number 1, they are cold-blooded animals, endothermic. No, ectothermic. We are endothermic. Because they are ectothermic, so they can be okay with slow metabolism and sluggish blood flow. And secondly, the movement are supported by the water. So again, they can do with the low metabolism or can afford slow metabolism and sluggish blood flow. So what did I say? That if this is the ultimate model of circulation, and of course it is not, right, then there is a problem. That once blood moves through the respiratory organ, heart is pumping the blood, venous heart is pumping the blood into respiratory organ, gills, and their pressure is lost and blood is moving very slowly. So this sluggish blood flow does not support very high metabolism. Does not support very high metabolism. But it's okay with the fish. Slow, sluggish blood flow is okay. Coming oxygen slowly, it is okay. Why it is okay? Because fish metabolism is relatively less as compared to mammals on land or birds. Because again, because they are ectothermic organism and their movement is supported by the water. Is that clear? So what did we say? Disadvantage of this system is, a major disadvantage of this system is that oxygenated blood will reach to the tissues with slow movement, not rapidly. Now imagine millions and millions and millions of years back you were a fish, and then millions of generations pass and you evolve into monkey. Okay, you can imagine better animal. Okay, you evolve into an elephant. Now, if elephant has this kind of circulation, you are in trouble. Elephant is in trouble. You know why elephant is in trouble? The reason being that if there's only venous heart or single two-chambered heart with only one loop, suppose elephant has this kind of structure, thanks God, we or elephant do not have this kind of circulatory system, we are more advanced. But if we had this kind of situation, we or monkeys or elephant or other your friends, whatever, we will be in trouble. You know why? Because we have to have very high metabolism. We need a rapid supply of oxygen. Blood should rapidly move from organs of respiration to the tissue, and from here rapidly move back. For this purpose, this little catwalk of the blood through this system is not acceptable. So, circulatory system from the fish as organism move to the land, and they become more dependent on higher metabolic rate, then they devised a mechanism for rapid supply of oxygenated blood to the tissue. You know, to generate the pressure here. If you increase the pressure in this, blood will move fast. So we need to repressurize this, because when blood was passing through the, when venous blood was passing through respiratory organ, it lost the pressure. And then it becomes slow and sluggish. there should be some way to repressurize it. So again it jumps rapidly like horses and goes to the peripheral tissues. For this purpose, later on in next lecture, we will learn blood is brought back to the heart and repressurized and then brought to the tissues, right? And then what will happen? This will become double circulation, that one loop from heart to the respiratory organs like lungs, back to the heart, and then to the other tissues. Is that right? So this will be the next development in, what is this? Circulatory system. So next lecture, the name of the lecture will be, of course, we'll go to the circulatory system of frog. We'll go to the circulatory system of humans, right? So we'll talk about that, because when animals move from the water to the land, either they become birds or they become mammals on the land, their body does not depend on the temperature outside. They have to maintain their temperature. They become endothermic. And with that, they move against the gravity. They require higher metabolism. For that purpose, they need rapid supply of oxygen to the tissues after oxygenation. So blood has to be brought back to the heart. Maybe we have to add more chambers to the heart. And those chambers repressurize the heart, repressurize the blood, so that blood go with heavy oxygen load very rapidly to the tissues to support the high metabolism. Yes, you have a question.
Sir, as you mentioned that these are aquatic animals, we have also seen that there are very big aquatic animals like dolphins and whales. How do their circulatory system?
Remember, first of all, dolphin is not or whale is not truly fish. They are mammals. And we'll talk about mammal the heart later. And that is not single system. Is that right?
Yes.
Just a common man thinks they are fish, but properly whale is mammal, not fish.
Why is it so?
We'll talk about that later, of course. So now I hope you have understood very clearly what kind of circulatory system fish has. Open or closed?
Closed.
Closed, very good. What kind of this closed system is? Single circulation, double circulation? Single circulation. And then what is the major disadvantage? The oxygenated blood moves slowly, but it's okay for fish, but it's not okay for us or for birds. Is that right? We need double circulation. And just a fast review, circulatory system of the fish. You start with systemic capillaries, you move into major veins, you move into sinus venosus, you move through SA valve, you reach into atrium, you move through AV valve, you reach into ventricle, you move through ventricular valve, you reach into conus bulbus arteriosus, and then you move into ventral, aorta, and from there branches go to the gills, which are called afferent vessels, because blood is arriving through the afferent vessels, and then move through gills, capillaries, loses carbon dioxide, acquires oxygen. Oxygenated blood moves through efferent vessels and into dorsal aorta, and dorsal aorta gives branches to the multiple tissues and supply the oxygenated blood, and oxygen will be again loaded to the tissues, carbon dioxide is taken up, and it becomes venous blood, and cycle repeats again. So this is closed circulatory system of the fish, and this is single circulatory system. We also call it that this system is, because this is the proper heart, atrium and ventricle. There's one atrium and one ventricle. We also call it as two accessory structures, right? So we also call this whole system two-chambered single circuit or two-chambered single loop circulatory system.
Why the other two structures are not considered to be a part of the heart?
Yeah, because when heart will later on develop, right, into land animals, these structures will eventually disappear, right? We'll talk that later, gradually, not suddenly. As evolutionary animals become more and more advanced, these structures are not remaining as such. Rather than having one atrium and one ventricle, initially the organism like frog, they will have two atrium and one ventricle. Then like reptiles, they will have two atrium and one ventricle partially divided. Then more advanced, like humans and birds, we will have two atrium and two ventricle. All of these things we will study later. Yes.
So as you mentioned that a fish does not have a very good circulatory system, which is enough for mammals, but is it still better than the insects? Is it
Oh yes, he has asked a very important question. He's saying that even though fish circulatory system is not as advanced as a human circulatory system, is it better than the insect system or not? Of course, it's better than insect system, because in the insect there was open circulatory system, right? And fish has simplest closed circulatory system, and there are about 15 to 20 differences between open circulatory system and closed circulatory system. That I will also explain in the next lecture. The name of the lecture will be open circulatory system versus closed circulatory system, and I will tell that what are the differences and what are the disadvantages of open circulatory system and how closed circulatory system is more advanced. For now, class dismissed. Thank you very much. Oh my God.